Let's go overseas now to the latest in the Middle East. Gaza's health ministry says all operations have been suspended at the Al-Shifa Hospital because it ran out of fuel. The ministry says one baby has died and dozens more are in jeopardy with no electricity at the largest hospital in Gaza. The Israeli military now says it will help evacuate babies in the hospital starting tomorrow. Israel claims the hospital is Hamas's main command post, but it still hosts thousands of patients and people seeking shelter. And video shared by the Palestinian Red Crescent Society shows teams at the Al-Quds hospital working in complete darkness. The PRCS is warning of an imminent shutdown at the hospital due to the depletion of fuel supplies. It says those who are in the ICU and babies on incubators will lose their lives as a result. Now, for more on this, we're joined by Angelie Ron, Director of Communications with Doctors Without Borders Canada, joining us live here on CP24. At some point, she will be giving us an inside look on what things are like and transpiring on the ground in Gaza as they deal with no fuel or running out of fuel. At the same time, until we get to her, let's talk about how Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince opened a joint Arab-Islamic summit on the Israel-Hamas war. Now, in his opening speech, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman bin Abdulaziz called the situation in Gaza a humanitarian disaster. He says the war threatens security and stability in the region and requires collective efforts to find a solution. The Crown Prince also criticized the UN Security Council and international community for failing to condemn what he calls Israel's violations of international law. And the number of Palestinians killed has surpassed 11,000, according to the Gaza Health Ministry, part of the Strip's Hamas-run government. The ministry says that 2/3 of the people killed are women and minors. It does not differentiate between civilians and militant deaths. And Israel's foreign ministry has lowered the death toll from Hamas's attack on the country back on October the 7th. It now says about 1,200 people were killed, down from 1,400. No reason was given for the change, but one official says the revision was made after a painstaking process to identify the bodies. All right, let's go back now to the operations, or lack thereof, at Al-Shifa Hospital and others. We're joined now live by Angelie Ron, Director of Communications, Doctors Without Borders Canada. So, when did you get an update on the lack of power, specifically in Al-Shifa Hospital? Now they're just completely dry of fuel. Nothing is operational?
Yes, indeed, as you had mentioned, in Al-Shifa Hospital, which is the biggest health facility where MSF is still working in Gaza, it has been hit several times, operating without electricity at this point, no internet, really receiving intermittent messaging from our team still there, and indeed, no electricity at this point in the hospital. What that means, effectively, I mean, as you can imagine, electricity is a lifeline in a hospital. Without it, patients die. We know already that 2 babies who are in neonatal incubators have died in this hospital. We also know, we heard from our staff, that someone in the ICU also died because the ventilator had shut down. To be very clear about the situation currently unfolding in Al-Shifa, there are hundreds of patients in Al-Shifa. We have over 600 post-operative patients that are still in need of medical care. There are 37 to 40 premature babies in incubators. It is unthinkable. It is unacceptable.
And so what's next? There's no electricity. Where can they go? We're reading that the evacuations could start soon, but how do you even logistically evacuate babies in incubators, for instance?
Yeah, it is unimaginable. I mean, what we would want to remind the international community, including leaders in Canada, is that these are hospitals. These are hospitals with patients inside them. Under international humanitarian law, all warring parties have an obligation to facilitate medical evacuations. And if these don't happen immediately, and indeed, as you had mentioned, it's simply impossible for a number of people who are unable to move, people who have lost limbs. We know that there are no ambulances able to be accessed in order to facilitate these evacuations. We know that outside, our teams are reporting smoke outside the hospital, violence outside the hospital, simply unable to move. If action is not taken right now, if we do not stop this bloodshed immediately with a ceasefire, or at the bare minimum, the medical evacuation of patients, these hospitals will indeed become a morgue.
So when you hear from the IDF that they're saying that Hamas is using that hospital and other ones as a command post. They have a network of tunnels underneath, and that's why they are targeting those specific areas. What have your groups on the ground witnessed this as well? Do they talk about how they're having run-ins with Hamas members coming out of tunnels or working through the hospital as a command center?
No, I mean, as humanitarians, our teams are made up of medical professionals, of surgeons, of doctors, of nurses. We don't know. We have repeatedly been asked questions about, tunnels, of Hamas, and quite frankly, we do not know. I mean, what we do know as MSF is that there are hundreds of patients, hundreds of civilians, and including health workers in these hospitals. We know that there are so many, in fact, that people are not only receiving care in operating rooms, in medical rooms, but there are so many people that they're overflowing onto the hallways, even outside. People are receiving care outside. This, to us, is the truest fact of what we know. They are first and foremost hospitals. And again, under international humanitarian law, they're required for the protection of hospitals to facilitate medical evacuations. And as medical professionals, this is top of mind and what we know above all.
All right, Angelie Ron, thank you so much for joining us and giving us, boots on the ground look at what is happening in these hospitals and the trickle-down effect on this war on those who are the most vulnerable. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.